Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Jeremy, founder of QuickMail.io.
And this is Amar with ZenMaid.
Okay,
You want to introduce today's topic?
I'm fine. I actually wanted to have this topic because over the years, I think I created like QuickMail 7 years ago, something like that. And over the years, I had like plenty of insights. So as we keep on saying, I think you're with me, Amar, on this one, that a second-time founder, like, you know, we got such a big advantage into all the things like we learn, and we are not going to make the same mistakes and so on and so on. And I think this is partly due of a lot of insights that we had as we're growing the business. And I was curious to figure out like what are some of the insights that Hammer had, because he seems to have like figured out everything. It's like he's got everything. Like, yeah, I know it's like this, and so on and so on. And so and I feel like I had like so many insights. Last year I got like a lot of insights as well that helped our business really grow much faster. And this year I got even more insight, which, that helps. And so, yeah, I was thinking like, how about we talk about some of our insights? It's difficult to remember all the insights we had, but of course, a few ones definitely, hit home, right? And we do remember them.
Yeah, definitely. That's interesting. Yeah, because I don't think that I have many like big insights anymore, and I would say that I haven't for a couple of years.
I was born
but it's more it's more because for me it's been in the execution, right? It's like I think we're talking about this a little bit before you hit record, that I've always known that like systems and process were like ultra important to building like a business that would allow me to be free. And I've known that since I started the business in 2013. But like just because I knew that doesn't mean that I was good at building systems and processes or making sure they worked and all those things. So a lot of it's been like more implementation. But I mean, yeah, I feel like the past couple of years there haven't been too many like major insights. It's been a lot more of just kind of like stay the course, right? And so I think it was probably up until maybe 2018 I think like every year it was like multiple insights and multiple kind of things of like, okay, this is how like we manage like this situation, right? And all sorts of stuff like that. But the past couple of years I think it's slowed down a little bit. So
I may throw a stone in a pond, and maybe that's not the right expression. But didn't you say like you had like a more like a personal insight, like you have to treat your health as a human, like work as well, right? Or
definitely
things like that, right? So
that
may be
definitely
more personal
on a personal level
insight,
there's a lot more.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it makes sense. More like for ZenMaid. And I think for that, it's more just that I'm very comfortable in my role, in my position within ZenMaid and where ZenMaid kind of fits in the industry and all that stuff. I think that it would be completely different once I move on to my next company. So I don't want anyone hearing that to think that like I do have it all figured out or anything like that. It's like, no, I'm just in a very comfortable situation that I spent like years like setting up for myself, So
yeah, it's the fruits of the labor, right?
Yeah, exactly. Right now I just get to kick back and kind of enjoy that, and so that makes it look like
yeah. And for me,
so hard, I guess.
it was a bit of a roller coaster. So at the beginning, I had like plenty of insight. I cracked one or two insight that prevented me from having QuickMail or a business that actually brings money. Then I got it, and then it was like super fun, going up and so on. And then there was a period of time where I was trying to figure out what was actually missing, or like how to actually get more growth and so on. And then the last couple of years been amazing because again, a lot of personal insight came in and helped me actually just move the business forward. So I'm curious, yeah, can I hear one of your insights? You mentioned you got plenty.
Well, so the first one is one of the first like concepts that you and I learned in the foundation when we first started our businesses back in like 2013, 2014. And that's just the concept of the 1,000-mile march. That's something that I think that every person that's starting out a business should be like introduced to. And that's something that I remind myself about, that even these days when like it just doesn't seem like worth it or whatever, that like everything within the business, every little task that you're going to accomplish, you can take that. And so the 1,000-mile march, it's essentially just the whole saying of the journey of 1,000 miles begins like with a single step, and it's just about taking like consistent action. Like, do you remember what the principle even
Yes, I
was?
do
I just
very
remember
well.
like,
Because this
okay,
is an
what was it?
insight I
Go
already
for it.
had from development. It's funny how I didn't necessarily apply it to business per se, or to the, someone else than myself. But basically the 1,000 mile march, or no, the 20-mile march is basically you do 20 miles every day, whether you feel like it or not. If you feel like super great, you don't do more, you just do the 20. And if you feel really bad, you only do the 20. So no matter how you feel, you always do those 20. So for example, if you had to make calls, it's not like, oh, I don't feel good today, or I feel sick, or I'm like, oh, under the weather, whatever kind of thing. You still do your 20. And then after that, you can go to bed or whatever. It's fine. But you do 20.
Gotcha.
But on the opposite,
Okay.
if you feel like, oh, I feel good, I can do more. And so, no, you stop at 20. And the idea of the 20-mile march is like, you can do that, ad vitam aeternam, like forever. And that's the whole point, where people who actually do like 100 calls today, the next day, like they feel under the weather, they don't feel good, and so on, and they have to restart. And restarting is really, really difficult. And that's where the 20-mile march concept came in. So I had that from development already on a personal level. So that was an insight I already had. And I was glad that, the foundation mentioned it, because I think that's a
definitely.
powerful one.
That was a big one for me and for us, for ZenMate in the beginning, because particularly Arun had a tendency to sprint things, that he'd be like, okay, cool, I'm just going to spend all day Sunday building a feature, and then like wouldn't plan on working during the week. And it was like, no, like we need to work on this daily, even if it's for a couple of hours, even if building the feature takes like an extra 2 hours of development time. It's important that we get these daily feedback loops and go through and do this and are just ultra consistent in the action. So yeah, that was probably the first thing, and it's probably the first thing that I try to push on to new entrepreneurs.
Here's another example, like specifically entrepreneurs. I woke up every morning at 4 a.m. and spend 2 hours on my business, whether I feel like it or not, or like for 8 months. Okay, I was contacting the Australia, so for them it was 2 p.m. in the afternoon, but consistently 4 a.m. to 6 a.m. I was working on my business, whether I felt like it or not. That's it.
Yeah, for sure.
Good one.
All right, what's number one for you?
The biggest one I had, it was December 2019, when I had like, that catastrophe type of migration that I had to do, working 18 hours a day. And I'm like, not kidding. It was effectively 18 hours every day for 2 weeks. And then after that, it was only 12 hours a day for another 2 weeks. That I basically built up a business instead of, I built up, a job instead of building up a business. And that really, that was probably the biggest insight. I was listening to E-Myth Revisited at the same time, and that like sort of like put the nail down, like it was like so the right book. I needed to listen at the right time. And that really made me see that I needed to create a company, otherwise I will get stuck in a job, and then if I die or if I fall under a bus, then the whole business is is gone. So yeah, I think that was the biggest insight for me, that even though I had to support people, they were just more assistants. I didn't actually systematize any of the business part. And I think it's also due of my nature, which is like I love working, but at this point I really reached my highest capability. I could not do more. Like 18 hours a day was the maximum I could do for 2 weeks, and everything else has to give in. Like my wife and my kids almost didn't see me. Like 2 hours during Christmas, great. Actually, 30 minutes during Christmas and 2 hours at or the other way around, 2 hours at Christmas and half an hour for the New Year. So really bad time, but teach me a big lesson.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, interesting. My next lesson was just this too shall pass. That lots of things in the business have felt like they were permanent, or that like they were going to have some long-term like impact on the business or ruin our brand, or like like people were never going to trust us again or sign up because we've made this mistake and blah blah blah. And the truth is that every single thing has completely like blown over like when things are really good, they're not always going to be really good. There are times where we've had 3 months in a row and it just seemed like, okay, we're going to knock all of our financial goals this year out of the park. And then we're immediately hit by 2 months where it's like we barely grow at all. And so, I mean, I feel like that's like almost more like the 20-mile march, or I keep saying the 1,000-mile march. The 20-mile march is more like in terms of your action, stay consistent. And like this too shall pass is more like emotionally staying consistent,
Yes.
of like, whether you're doing really well or really badly, it's not going to stay that way. And that's okay, right? Every business is going to be cyclical like that. But
Okay,
that's
I love.
one that keeps me level headed.
This is a pragmatic view, right? Of how
Hmm.
things happen, and I think it's very healthy, yeah, as well to have,
Yeah.
because a lot of time it is a roller coaster. It's like, oh man, our business will go down to zero. Yeah, it may.
Yeah.
so,
Yeah,
so yeah,
exactly. Yeah,
okay,
it might.
it
Yeah.
might.
If
So
if it was guaranteed, everyone would do it. So,
that's right. Okay. Another insight. Let's talk about more recent insight. I think I had like a big one as well. This end of last year, actually. Last year we had it's a personal tendency to try to develop people more than trying to get the job done. So it's more like a tendency that I had for, and bear in mind that I know I'll come back to what I just said, but bear in mind that it
mm,
is like everything with insight. It's always like you're on one end of the spectrum, then you discover the insight, and then you go try to the other end of the spectrum, but then you realize it's too much, and then you just end up like doing something
mhm.
kind of
Yeah,
thing. And I
absolutely.
think it's the beauty of the dichotomy of leadership, honestly. But I realized that I was spending way more time trying to develop personal individuals rather than actually making sure the job to be done is done. You see what I mean? And so I think I had a disproportionate amount of energy spent on personal development of individuals rather than actually the job to be done in the business. And I think that was detrimental in me helping to systematize the business because I was way too much relying on the individuals. And every time, a key element left, actually only once, but a key element actually left, then I was like, oh shit, like we were like 3 or 4 months back in where we should have been. And it was much harder to replace someone because all the work I've been doing in trying to personally develop this person into getting to a point where that person can make decision on their own and really look at things. And well, that was sort of like lost, and I had to sort of like go back, find someone else, retrain that person and so on. And then I think now it's getting better because I see more like the job to be done. And therefore, if that person leave, then I will be able to know exactly what needs to be replaced. And now I think that's something I like for the business for a very long time. But I think it's the sort of like
Gotcha.
knock-on effect of, 2019, like end of 2019. So it took like 2 years to sort of like ingrain and yeah, and I mean those insights actually sometimes take time to bloom, right?
Okay. Yeah. So with that, I would say that we try to do both at ZenMade. So we try to train everyone up, but we also try to be very aware of these are the vital jobs to be done by each person on the team. So when someone leaves, we're immediately prepared to replace their vital jobs to be done.
Yeah.
And then there's usually going to be quite a bit of training that we have to do. But yeah, like losing a couple of months because someone quit who you've trained up, to me, that's just a part of like running the business. But there are definitely ways to mitigate that risk. And it sounds like you're beginning to do that. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't mean like I won't, help people develop personally. In fact, I keep on doing that, and one-on-ones are perfect, spot for that. But at the same time, I was kind of not looking enough at systematizing things that those individual needs to be, accomplishing as on a task level. So I
Yeah.
think that's going to be really helping for me and recruiting, because recruiting always have been a very hard nut to crack for me.
Yeah.
And I think this sort of realization lately actually really helps to make recruiting better, because I don't need to find the individual yet. I need to really find the actual job to be done. And so that's easier for doing the job spec, that's easier for doing the recruitment. And when they're on, or as the interview goes on, then I can figure out and assess where they are, into their own personal development.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. Uh,
Oh, one
my
thing I
next
want to
one would
say
be, yeah.
before I interrupt you, and it's also
Mhm.
maybe for the listeners, and but what we are saying in terms of our insights, if someone would have tell me exactly my insight right now, but like 6 years ago, it would have been like not the right time for me. I probably wouldn't have
Mhm.
registered, right? So there's a lot of those things like the right time to get that sort of
Yeah,
advice or that sort of insight. Like, there's a typical
yeah,
like when you're ready, the mentor appear or some stuff like that, right?
yeah, exactly.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it's a word of
Yeah,
disclaimer. Mhm.
and you oftentimes, like the same thing with advertising and with like brand advertising, where you've got to see like a certain brand 7 times, like on a conscious or subconscious level, before
Right,
you'll
true.
begin to sort of like trust them. It's the same thing with a lot of ideas and a lot of insights like this, right? Is we've all heard all of these insights, even the ones that we're talking about like here. These aren't things that haven't been talked about before, but a lot of times people in their 20s see them and they look at them and they just shrug them off or whatever, and then they get some life experience, and it's like, oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense, right? And that's
You
true of
mean I
some
can't be
pieces of advice. It's not
a
true of
life coach at
others.
15 years old?
Yeah. Yeah. um yeah, so
Development?
my
Mhm.
next one is one that I'd known for a long time, but I don't think that I'd really appreciated it until the past, like, maybe 2, maybe 3 years, that I've really begun to like to appreciate this, and that's hire better than you. And that's something that I'd always wanted to hire better than me, but I could never afford to hire better than me, which is pretty sad because I was not worth very much. So, um, yeah.
Good one.
Um, so, that's probably the biggest thing that for me has really changed things in the past like 2 to 3 years, of just almost every person on the team, I would say, can probably do whatever it is that they're doing better, like better than I could if I was in their job, if I was in their position. And like I said, that was a focus from the beginning, but it just didn't seem possible for the longest time. And not only because of not being able to to afford the people, but because it always just seemed like, well, I know so much about the business. How's someone supposed to come in and do like the marketing better than me, or whatever? And now I see that it's like, oh, actually, in almost every department, they do a much better job than if I was in charge. So yeah,
Do you
that's
think
been a massive one.
do you think this, I mean, I've been in 12 different companies, and something that never really changed is that people always consider the people at the top like morons.
Yeah, yeah,
That may be
exactly.
why. That may be
Because
why. It's just
yeah,
because they keep hiring people that are better than them. But
hmm
it's smart, And in fact, it is
yeah,
smart. So,
yeah,
but
exactly.
imagine the opposite was true. That'd be terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, cool. Good insights. An insight that that really helped me going out of development and then starting my own company, and I see this being done. It's very early on. Is that
hmm
people don't buy features; people always buy benefits. And that is something that
Yeah.
never really, as a developer, it's not really something like that I really had ingrained and internalized. But going through creation of Quickman and really understanding stuff like that really helped. Copywriting was was one of my missing key ingredients really at the beginning.
Mm,
That was a big insight this month.
gotcha. Yeah, makes sense. Okay. Um, yeah, that's one of those ones that I think is obvious in hindsight. Once you see it,
Yeah,
you can't unsee it. But
that's
until
right.
until you really understand it, it's kind of a difficult one to internalize or to figure out. So
And then the
yeah,
problem I
okay.
see with this insight is like I mean, it starts to get better, but it's like you still have to teach people to do that. Um, I don't know why. It's just maybe human
Yeah.
nature. Who knows?
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Um, okay. So I had two other ones that I think are pretty good. I feel like I should have started with these, so we could have started off with a bang. But okay, so
That's fine. Now there's only two
two
listeners,
other,
so it's just you
yeah,
and me.
yeah, right. um, so okay, I'll start with this one. So this is an insight that I had quite early on in ZenMaid, but it took me a really long time to figure out how to implement it. And it's something that I had not figured out prior to ZenMaid. And that is marketing is really just helping people for free, right? Or at least that's one way of marketing, right? Is any time that you add value to like your target customers or to your target audience, and you don't ask them for any money in return, you don't ask them to pay you for a service or for a product or anything like that, you're essentially drawing attention and drawing eyeballs to your brand for free, particularly if you can get people to share about that. So we've talked about that with like the summit and some of the other things that ZenMaid has done, but that was something that I think really kind of shifted sort of how I began to look at like at content marketing. That content marketing doesn't just have to be like an article, right? That some of like the best marketing that we've done are like our holiday logos, right? Where it's like, you know, our customers can just go fill out a type form and they just upload their logo, and then we give them 8 different variations of like Christmas holiday
That's cool.
logos. They just select which one they want, and then we send them back their logo with like a Santa hat over like the first like letter, and then snow in the background or like something like that. And it's completely free. Everyone, when they received it, went on to Facebook and posted their logo for other people to
That's
see,
sweet.
oftentimes with like a thank you like from us. And so that's something that I wouldn't have come up with without having that sort of like mental model like in mind, right? Of course, there's other ways of marketing, like paid marketing and stuff like that, like direct marketing. But like in terms of content marketing, that's like a really nice lens to look at it from.
Love it. Love it. How do you actually handle when someone comes with a completely different view in terms of marketing?
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, you know, this is what you actually discovered, but if someone actually discovered something else, like you think like, oh no, marketing is more about doing this and this, like how would you actually reconcile the two? Or do you reconcile
Well,
the
I mean,
two? Or...
it would depend on what their viewpoint is,
All
because
right.
like I don't think that that's really
It's too
like
abstract, yeah.
yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's one way of looking at marketing. I don't think that all marketing fits that, but I think that you can come up with a lot of ideas by going like, okay, like how can we help our customers for free? You'll get a lot of marketing ideas by asking yourself that question.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Let's move on to a different one. Another insight I
Mhm.
had, as I was doing more demos in QuickMail, so that was an earlier insight as well, is that people just don't necessarily buy the product; they also buy you as in trust, and it's
Mm.
more like trust. So you basically need to have trust in the person that's talking, the product that is being built, and then the company as well, which is the brand. So if you have those 3 trusts, then the sales is easy. And you usually get it through referrals, for example. Like when you get referrals, you got those trusts already built in one of the 3 buckets. Other than that, then you need
Mm.
to effectively build those things. I was surprised at how many people just wanted to give me a chance, like saying like, hey, okay, yeah, I'll try your product and I'll buy your product and so on, because they like the product, but they also like me during the interview, or not interview, interview during the demo,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I was very surprised of that, because coming again from just a purely development mindset, for me was just like, I don't care if I like this person or not. If the product is what I need, then I buy the
Yeah.
product. But it was like a nice surprise that I can be having fun during demos and just, you know, connect genuinely
Yeah.
with people, and it worked even better. And I was
Yeah.
like, okay, I don't do that for
Yeah.
it to work, but it's quite fun when it does. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
one of my insights as well, that people will go
Yeah.
and not buy the solution, even if they're the right solution for them, if they don't sort of like you, which is weird.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I think it makes perfect sense. That's kind of funny that that was like an insight for you. Because for me,
I know,
obviously
huh?
coming from like the sales background of like, to me, that's like, that's so
It's
obvious,
101.
right? Of like,
Right.
you know, yeah, like you have to have like,
Yeah.
you have to have an insanely good product for me to buy your product if I don't like you,
Yeah,
right?
which
Like
is
Uber,
odd. Yeah.
right? Like Uber is like the one, right? It's like, okay, like I don't like the way they behave. I don't like the way that Uber runs their business, but I will continue to give them money because their product is like actually like that good, right? But in most cases, it's not, right? Like there are
Yeah,
people that
when you
don't
got
sign up for ZenMaid
alternative.
because they don't like me. Yeah, right. When you got like alternatives or whatever. But now I really like the fact that like that now we're beyond the point where people aren't buying because of me. They do trust the brand, but they don't buy because of me anymore. Now, granted, they do buy because of other people on our team, but I like that I was finally able to get to that point where it's no longer like my face that's on everything. So all the emails do come from me. So, okay, last one for me.
Okay.
This is the age-old classic that everyone's heard because it's been beaten into the ground over the past 15 years or longer, but that's like the 80-20 rule, that 80% of your results come from 20% of your actions. However, one thing was that this is probably, or not probably, this is absolutely because I was very, very naive. After reading like the 4-hour work week and before getting into like the job market and stuff, that like I thought that if you had like the 80-20, yeah, well, I thought that if you focused on like the 80-20, that you could literally do 20% like of the work. And what I've realized is that particularly when you're like a startup, is that it's not about that. It's about like, it's almost more about like energy like optimization, or like where your mental resources go, that oftentimes you still have to do 100% of the work, but you only have like the attention span to maybe do 20 or 50% of it really, really well. And so when you're starting a company, figuring out what that 20% is that you need to just do out of this world compared to anything else in your company, that's where the difference is made between successful companies and unsuccessful companies. Because, if you're trying to make everything pixel perfect, but you just need a functioning prototype, you're going to end up 6 months behind the guy that chose to like talk to more customers because that was the 80-20 of the time. So that was a big insight for me. Yeah.
One note, a week is usually 40 hours and 20% of that is 8 hours. So already you're doing just 10% if you're thinking of working 4 hours a week. just as a small funny note.
Okay, I didn't follow the math there, but okay.
It's like the 80-20%. So if you can wait, work, anyway. What did I want to say next? I don't know. I was carried across by my bad math joke kind of thing. No, I just, overall, like, I agree very much with what you were saying. Oh, there you go. This is an exercise in prioritization. And prioritization is super, super, super important. And the more you can move things, and the more impact you have, the more prioritization is super, super, super important. And I didn't realize that, a lot of people don't have much good prioritization. It's crazy.
Yeah, I take it for granted.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I always keep them back to the goal. It's like, hey, the goal is to do that. Why on earth are you doing this? Achieve that. So, don't worry about this. That doesn't actually help you. And it is effectively an exercise in prioritization. And I think the 80-20 should always be on the back of your head, like, hey, what are the 20% that actually do make an impact? So it's a great insight. For me, my last insight, and I got many, I keep forgetting them because as we get inside, they get being internalized. And after that, it's hard to know how it was not to know, right? So, but one of the insight I had last year was that culture is super, super important. I had to let go my support person after working 2 years with us. And it just never clicked. I just could not work with him. His way of working at a company, it was not the company I wanted. And it really took me time to figure out that this just doesn't work because we have different views of what the business should be, what the company should be, and stuff like that. And I think I spent, which is fine at the beginning. You don't have many people in your company, and so you can sort of like discover that. But once you discover it, it's really hard to allow that again. Like, I would not allow anyone who doesn't have a share of values of what a company should be to work at Quickmail anymore. I don't care how well they are working, unless they're working like, freelancer, a couple of hours and don't have any interaction with the team at all. I don't think I will not take this risk anymore, just because it's so much harder to get everyone aligned and so on. So it's 2 years ago, I really realized that I needed to craft the culture. The culture needs to be crafted, and it needs to be a culture in which I want to work, right? And I think that's one of the recent year insights. because the culture scale,
Yeah.
but otherwise you just
Yeah.
need to change, and
Yeah.
you're gonna have a culture that gets built whether you want it or not, better crafted.
Yeah, makes sense. Actually, that's a really good point. That's actually, I guess that's an insight that I came to as well, during like the past couple of years. Is so it's funny because this isn't something that we have written down anywhere, but it's like a mental model that I follow in my head. Is whenever we're searching to fill like a position in ZenMaid, there's essentially a culture checkbox in my like head of, does this person need to fit the culture, or is it okay if they don't? So some of our agencies, like there's like one agency that comes to mind that I'm particularly the one who deals with them, and like I have a personal relationship with them. It's fine, but the way that they deal with the rest of our team really wouldn't fly under any other circumstances. But because they're very far removed from the business, they don't really interact with the team except in very, very like rare situations, and they're highly specialized and very good at what they do, it's easy for me to like overlook. But if like someone on our support team had that same attitude and was on like the support calls with the rest of the team every week, they would be off the team very, very quickly. And so it's one of those things of like realizing that just because someone can do the job well doesn't mean that that person is good for the job, right? And that's something that I think is a difficult one to kind of internalize if you hadn't really realized that previously.
Yeah, especially at the beginning, I think.
Yeah. And I think that's a big reason that, I always hear from like, my mom is always complaining about how like, oh, like, Silicon Valley companies are saying they can't find enough developers, but there's so many developers that are unemployed. It's like, well, yeah, because like it's more complicated than that. Like a developer is not a developer, and like a Ruby developer is not a Ruby developer. Just because like they can do the same thing, there's so much more to fitting in a company than that, And so I think that's something that is just underappreciated sometimes.
All right, finish with a bang. All right.
Yeah, love it. I think this is a good one. I think we should probably do this again more often, because like even as we're going through this, I'm thinking of like more things that you're saying something and I'm like, oh yeah, that reminds me of this. And
that's it.
Yeah,
we keep on forgetting it as they get internalized. Should we have written them somewhere?
I had two more that I could go through really quickly.
Go. It's a bonus.
Don't compare yourself to others. It's a cliche.
It's a good one to internalize.
Mario.
It's really
it is. Don't compare yourself to others, realizing that you're on your journey, and it's important to just make your business better and better. It's really easy to be working on something that, I fell into this today, that I was watching something on YouTube from a guy that's made like $100 million selling to like gyms or whatever, and I'm like, what the hell am I doing at ZenMaid? Working on something.
There's always someone like better than you.
$1.5 million a year.
Always.
There's always someone better. And so, but it's important to remember that like, even at like our level, we're comparing ourselves, and at his level, he's comparing himself to like billionaires and stuff like that.
I'm like, good for him. I'm like, I'm happy for him. It's like great for him.
Exactly.
Like,
and so it's reaching that point where you can be happy for him, you can be inspired, you can learn from that person.
That's a good word.
And that, and that like, you can even have like a bit of jealousy, but it's make sure that that's not reflective on you, right? Like that person succeeding on that level is not reflective of you not succeeding, or of you failing, or of anything like that. And that's something that I think was hard for me to internalize for a couple of years. Whereas now it's like what you're saying, it's easier to just be happy for people, right? So there's that. And then the last one was just a really generic, but just systematize. Like systems and processes are like what set you free. And like we've talked about this before on this podcast, but I used to think that systems were almost like rigid. I didn't like having to deal with systems and having to be in systems, because they limit my creativity. It made me feel pointless. And now I've realized that because I've built enough systems into place to take care of various things, of various triggers that happen within our business, because those systems are in place, I can be as unsystematized as I want with my time every day. So systems give me the ability freedom, to be unsystematized. Exactly.
Which is funny. When did you have this insight? Like How much year? Like, was
I
it
mean, because
years ago?
I've always known like the importance of systems. Because I mean, it must have been pretty early on in ZenMate of like 2014, like 2015. But it was probably like 2015, 2016, because that's when I first brought on Chris, and that's when I really began to realize like, oh,
the
like I
advantage of
put this
that,
system
being able
in
to
place,
rely on
and
the
now I don't have to
system.
worry
Yeah,
about it. Exactly,
yeah.
exactly. And so
For
I
me,
think I
it's
had it in
last
my head
year.
that like, okay.
Which is
Last
funny, I'm
year,
a
okay,
developer,
yeah.
right? But I didn't do that to the business. It's because it was like, you know, I spend a lot of effort on one thing. That's great. And then I need my attention to something else, and that you know, the return on that effort actually diminish over time. So we
Yeah.
need to put it up and then put someone in place to hold it up, right? And then as I put more system in place, that's really what helped us really grow tremendously last year, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. All right, awesome, Cass. I think we should leave it here. If you have more questions, it's Amar at well, not at, it's just Amar in Twitter, all one word.
It's just Amar on Twitter, yes, and Jay Chatelain
There you go.
on Twitter as well.
You got
Drop
it.
us a message. Let us know what insights you've had, or if there's any other ones maybe you've heard us talk about that you want us to talk more about on here. So yeah,
There we
good
go.
episode, I think.
Great. Or comments on YouTube works too.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Thanks, Amar.
See you next time.